I was shocked to see a tweet from David Graeber that kind of points out, I don't want to speak for him, but his tweet says to me that people on the left are acknowledging that there are too many people on the left embracing fascistic tactics. 100%. So first, let me tell you who this guy David Graeber is. I don't know a whole lot about him, but I can say in 2012, David Graeber and I were listed in the Time 100. This is Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. We were nominated for it. We weren't official. We were candidates. I don't know why we were put together, but I think it's because we both had some kind of connection with Occupy Wall Street. I was the media messenger of Zuccotti, they called it. David Graeber was an anarchist, anthropologist, they called him, and we were both very influential. David Graeber is a professor, and he is notable. I'm not showing you this to brag about any of my accolades, but to point out that he is someone who I've had an association with. I don't really know him. I've met him a couple times, but that he was honored by Time for his work during Occupy. This is very important. David posted this tweet. Why is fascism on the rise? Maybe one reason is because certain elements of the left have adopted philosophies, tactics, and sensibilities once universally rejected because of their historic association with fascism and normalized them. Just a thought. And that's exactly how I've felt for a long time. I consider myself to be on the left and always have. I'm a centrist, but I lean left, right? Most tests show that I'm like an independent. I'm not Democrat or Republican. And I'm like basically a social liberal to the extent that I can be, I suppose. There are a lot of things I agree with conservatives about, but I'm in the middle, right? So I don't like the fringe extremes of either side. David Graeber is basically saying, this is my interpretation, I don't want to take him out of context, right? So I recommend you ask him if you have questions, but my understanding is what he's saying is that there are people on the left who believe the same philosophies that fascists believe, and so they use these tactics thinking that it's the right thing to do. This normalizes the tactic, allowing the actual fascists to use them, because now it's normal. Essentially, the left normalizes fascism, allowing fascists to rise up. Not that the left is entirely fascist or anything like that, but because of their willingness to use fascist tactics and to believe certain fascist ideas, actual pure fascists, like 100% actual legit fascists, are like, okay, game on, we're allowed to do this. So I've got a bunch of his tweets pulled up, and we're going to go through them a little bit. Someone responded, you really need to give some concrete examples. Do you mean there is something in the accusations against the left that they are intolerant of alternative views? It's a line often trotted out by those defending their own bigotry. Before I read David Graeber's response, I want to point out this guy he's just in a bubble, plain and simple. You know, I've tried telling people they're in bubbles. I'm also in a bubble. My bubble is much larger than the average person's because I curate my lists specifically to divide among the far left and the far right and everything in between. I've got like the most vile anti-fascist people. I follow them on Twitter, okay? And they spew nonsense. And I've got far right-wing and nationalist and white nationalist people. I follow them too. I follow Fox News, MSNBC, CNN. I try to make sure I'm seeing what people are saying. When we say that there is a certain element within the left that is intolerant of other ideas, it's a fact. They're the ones calling for banning speech, not the conservatives. The conservatives trying to debate people, right? So David Graeber responds, I think a certain stream of leftist discourse, which believes there are no truths and everything is power, acts like winning arguments is everything and any means are appropriate to do it, embraces identity as the only reality, etc., resembles fascism in many respects, straight up saying that these identitarian leftists resemble fascists. He's not saying they are fascists, right? Because they're not actually nationalistic. But they embrace a lot of the same ideas. Might is right, power is everything, you must win at all costs, by any means necessary. And he's pointing this out. And I think it's really interesting. But let's jump to another one of his tweets. In response to the first tweet, someone said, I disagree, but perhaps that's because I'm in the US. Over here, the left is far too conciliatory. We play nice guy and let the right control the conversation. I want to directly respond to that. That's technically true. The traditional and passive liberals of this country, according to the study from Hidden Tribes, shows they're exhausted and they don't engage. Progressive activists make up 8% of this country. They're extremely vocal, but the traditional and passive liberals are exhausted and not engaging. This means the conservatives, at 25% of the country, are having a much more prominent role in politics. But David Graeber responded, I totally agree about that. I'm talking about philosophically Nietzschean doctrines of there is no truth but only power combined with identity politics, and in terms of internal debate, normalization of interpersonal viciousness. Academics talk in a very specific way. You know, reading these academic papers on social justice and feminism, it can be really irritating. Like, I think a good example is Anita Sarkeesian. The way she speaks is overly verbose for no reason. Because it's not meant to convey an idea to the average person, it's meant to be overly verbose and extremely specific, which makes things, you need someone to translate it. Not always, I'm not saying everyone's dumb, I'm just saying, you know, it gets very specific. Nietzschean doctrines of, you know, normalization of interpersonal viciousness. Like, yeah, break that down for me, buddy. But, you know, basically, what he's criticizing is that among the left, there is this growing group that believes truth is irrelevant. Truth is subjective, therefore, whatever people believe is truth, and power is everything. These are the people who are willing, who want to win by any means necessary. And that is fascistic. I don't want to say they're fascists, but it is fascistic. At least my understanding of what David Graeber is saying, and I don't disagree with him. The problem is, those of us who don't believe in oppressing others and forcing them to adhere to certain ideas or tricking them or just believing might is right. Right? We're the people who believe in rules and fairness. They don't. So they're willing to use the rhetoric of might is right. There is no truth but power. To then lie, cheat, and steal their way to power. And that terrifies me. Well, we've got some more tweets we can go through. This person said, bad tweet. Which fascism is on the rise from left-wing nationalism and trolling exactly? Is that why Brazilian fascism is rising? The Philippines, Hungary, the US? Which fascism specifically are you blaming on the would-be victims of fascism, or just all of it? And this person's got a black flag. What's really fascinating is that there's a lot of people who are a part of that fascistic, you know, philosophy, angry with David Graeber, who is one of the most prominent anarchist leftist types. David said, yes, there is a global context in which these events happen, and it's one in which Nietzschean ideas that truth does not exist and everything is power, and therefore anything you say or do to win is legit, have become normalized. He is right. In my opinion, it wasn't the right that was trying to manipulate and trick people into believing things by any means necessary. They were using partisan tactics, they were highlighting facts that they thought were more important, they were hyper-focused, and the left was too. But now we're seeing conservatives complain that the media is fake news, and you have this big uprising of digital media outlets who write fake news all the time. They smear people, they lie about people, they do anything by any means necessary to win. What happens? When they start doing that, we see the actual fascists say, hey, fair game. They're doing it, so can we. They're contributing to this problem. And those of us who believe in liberty, freedom, fairness, and equality we're playing by the rules. We're not willing to win by any means necessary. This means we're at an extreme disadvantage between these people who will. Now here's the important thing. I believe it was Noam Chomsky, famous lefty guy, who said this. Antifa, when they get violent, open the door to right-wing violence. He said something to the effect of, when you get violent, you're entering an arena you can't win, because the right will always be more brutal. Think about the moderate conservatives in this country. Think about the Proud Boys versus Antifa. The Proud Boys will probably always win a fight against Antifa one-on-one. Antifa's gonna have to come in a big group. Why? Well, Proud Boys they believe more in strength than Antifa does. Antifa tends to be the collectivists. But when Antifa shows up to start violence, guess who finishes it? The Proud Boys in Patriot Prayer. Now imagine when you actually have legit fascists, when you actually have legit neo-Nazis, and you're entering this arena and normalizing it, and the Portland police don't do anything about it. You're opening the door for legitimate fascists and Nazis. And you know, the biggest problem I have, there was a thread on Reddit where they were talking about some comic artist. They were saying not to share his work because he was a Nazi. And I was like, I don't know if he's actually a Nazi or not. Because of the left, not only normalizing violence, but because of how they brand everyone a Nazi. When people try explaining someone's a neo-Nazi, I'm like, yeah, I kind of don't know if I can believe you. They're making it like the activist who cried Nazi. We're at a point now where when you call mixed race and minority people white supremacists, I don't know if I can trust you because you sound insane. You like, dude, you're wrong. And it's all rooted in this idea that there is no truth, only power. Might is right and by any means necessary. And that means they will smear everyone. They will lie about everyone. They will call Jewish people neo-Nazis. They will call brown people white supremacists. Why? Because they want that to be in the rhetoric so they can win. That is a fascistic philosophy, a fascistic tactic. Now, fascism is authoritarian nationalism. It's defined differently by a lot of different people, but you could theoretically argue that, Antifa could be fascists, not in the sense that they're nationalists, but that they want a one-world globalized system. So one of the arguments about fascism is that it seeks to spread its doctrine, eventually world domination. If that's the case, while Antifa isn't a nationalist organization, they don't believe in borders, they want no borders, they want a single solid world. So you could argue that's a workaround for crypto-fascism. Crypto typically refers to the fact they're hiding it. In my opinion, I don't know exactly what the idea of David Graeber trying to get across. I don't want to pin this on him and misrepresent him. But I think a lot of what he's saying is that basically there are elements on the left that have normalized fascism and authoritarianism, manipulation, and the idea that might is right. That's what they're doing. And because of this, we are going to see it on all sides. When the left gets violent, they create violence on the right in turn. Then they panic about it. Then you get people complaining, oh, the Proud Boys are being violent. It's like, well, the Proud Boys didn't start the violence. Even that fight that I criticized the Proud Boys for kicking the guy when he was on the ground, and I'll stand by that. But the fight was started by Antifa. We now know this. Witnesses, activists on the left said Antifa knocked a guy's hat off and it started a fight. That's a physical assault, plain and simple. Doesn't matter what the severity is. I'm not going to equate the knocking the head off to kicking him on the ground. No, kicking him on the ground is wrong. Fine, you don't have to agree with me. The point is they didn't start the violence. But now what they've done is Antifa knocked the hat off a Proud Boy, and then when the Proud Boys swung back, they went, help, help, I'm being repressed, I'm being oppressed. And people are going, oh no, right-wing violence. And this is on purpose, in my opinion. Not everybody, it's not a grand conspiracy, but there are anti-fascists on the left who want to start the violence so they can film the right and then claim, oh no, look how violent they are, to rally more people to the left. They are using violence, they are using fascistic tactics, and people are starting to recognize it, plain and simple. And it's important that we recognize this. It is not the left. There is a colloquial left. Typically, people associate the worst of the worst when they're talking about an idea. When people say the left, they're usually referring to regressive left, illiberal reactionaries. Keep in mind, that study I posted and talked about time and time again shows most of the left is exhausted and not engaging. What we're talking about is a small fringe group of extremely active leftists who are dominating the conversation, and they're breaking the rules to do it by any means necessary. And because of this, the traditional liberals, the passive liberals, and the politically disengaged are just exhausted and staying out of the fight. So it's not about left versus right. Absolutely not. It's about fringe extremist, illiberal, reactionary regressives, the regressive left, and the tactics they use to normalize fascism. And then regular folks, the few liberals that are still active in politics, like myself, who, look, if you're a fringe lefty, you'll look at a social liberal and a moderate conservative and be like, they look so similar. You're right, because social liberals and moderate conservatives agree on most things. We disagree on various things, for sure, but when it comes to voting, we're not that far away. You've got moderate conservatives, social liberals, and then the far left. So they're looking at us, they can only see the same thing. And these people are creating the problem of the reciprocal violence and then using it to their advantage to try and destabilize things. We need to point this out, and we need to say, you can be on the left and be sane. Just because you disagree with illiberal, reactionary, regressive leftists doesn't mean you are not still on the left. They are just the fringe extremists of the authoritarian side. Anyway, check out David Graeber if you want to see more of his stuff. He's a lefty for sure. But I think it's interesting to see that he's pointing out this tactic that's being used. I got a couple more videos coming up in just a few minutes, so stick around.